There is a pressure in your life right now that feels too precise to be random, as if everything is being pushed at once, not to overwhelm you, but to expose something deeper. And Ibn Arabi would point to this moment as a misunderstanding. Most people never correct, because you think life is testing you to see if you can survive it, when in reality, it is revealing what in you does not need to be protected anymore. And this is why it feels intense, because what is being touched is not your outer life, it is the core of how you hold yourself within it. So this is not the moment to collapse. This is the moment to stay strong, not by force, but by seeing clearly, because this test is not here for the reason you think it is here, to uncover a part of you that cannot be shaken once you finally recognize it. This pressure is targeting your inner core. What you are feeling right now is not surface-level pressure. It is not about small problems, temporary stress, or ordinary challenges that come and go. It is reaching deeper than that. It is touching the part of you that defines how you respond to everything, your sense of control, your sense of security, your sense of who you are when things do not go as expected. This is why it feels heavier than usual. It is not just affecting your circumstances, it is interacting with the way you hold yourself within those circumstances. You may notice that situations which once felt manageable now feel more intense, more personal, more difficult to ignore. It is not because life suddenly became unfair, it is because what is being activated inside you is no longer staying hidden. The patterns you relied on, the ways you protected yourself, the beliefs that quietly shaped your reactions, they are all being brought forward. And once something is seen clearly, it can no longer operate in the same way as before. This kind of pressure does not come to destroy you. It comes to reveal where your foundation is still dependent on things that were never stable to begin with. Maybe it is your need for certainty. Maybe it is your attachment to outcomes. Maybe it is the way you measure your worth based on how life responds to you. When these inner structures are challenged, it feels uncomfortable because they were never questioned deeply before. They were simply accepted as part of who you are. Ibn Arabi would point to this moment and say that what you are experiencing is not random difficulty, it is precision. The pressure is not scattered, it is directed. It is touching exactly what needs to be seen so that it can be understood differently. And this is why running away from it does not bring relief. Ignoring it does not make it disappear. Because the purpose is not to overwhelm you, it is to bring clarity to something that has been operating quietly for a long time. You might feel like everything is happening at once, as if there is no space to breathe. But even this has a purpose. When pressure increases, it removes your ability to rely on old reactions. It forces you to notice what you are holding on to internally. It shows you where your tension comes from, where your fear is rooted, where your need to control is strongest. And once you see this clearly, something begins to shift, not outside, but within. This is why strength in this moment is not about pushing harder or trying to fix everything immediately. Real strength is the ability to remain steady while these inner layers are being exposed. It is the ability to observe what is happening inside you without collapsing into it. Because the moment you stop reacting automatically, you begin to see that this pressure is not defining you. It is showing you something about yourself that you can now move beyond. So this is not just a difficult phase, it is a revealing phase. It is uncovering the deeper structure of how you experience life. And once that structure becomes visible, it gives you the opportunity to exist in a way that is no longer controlled by what used to shake you. This is why the pressure feels precise, because it is not here to scatter you. It is here to bring you closer to a version of yourself that is no longer built on what can easily be disturbed. What you're losing was never meant to hold you. What feels like loss right now is not as simple as something being taken away. It feels personal because it was something you leaned on. something that gave you a sense of stability, something that made things feel predictable. When it begins to fade or break apart, it creates a feeling of emptiness, like something important is slipping out of your hands. But the deeper truth is that what you are losing was never designed to carry the weight you placed on it. You believed it would hold you steady. You trusted it to remain the same. You expected it to continue supporting you in the way it always had. And because of that expectation, you built a quiet dependence on it. Not always consciously, but enough that when it shifts, it affects how you feel about everything. This is why the loss feels heavier than it should. It is not just about the thing itself, it is about what you attach to it internally. But not everything that feels stable is actually strong. Some things only appear reliable because they have not been tested deeply. And when life begins to apply pressure, what cannot truly support you starts to weaken. This is not a failure. It is a correction. It is showing you that what you relied on was limited, temporary, or never meant to carry you in the way you believed. Ibn Arabi would guide you to understand that this kind of removal is not random. It is intentional. It is part of a process that clears away what was quietly shaping your sense of security in a way that was incomplete. Because as long as you continue to rely on something that cannot fully hold you, you remain tied to instability without realizing it. The moment it is removed, you feel the gap, but that gap is not there to harm you. It is there to make you aware. You may try to hold on, to fix it, to bring it back to how it was. That reaction is natural. But what is being taken away cannot return in the same form because its role in your life has already ended. It has already revealed its limitations. And once something has shown you that it cannot truly support you, continuing to depend on it only delays your growth. This is why the loss feels sharp. It interrupts your sense of continuity. It forces you to face something directly instead of avoiding it. But within that interruption is a deeper shift. You begin to see that your strength was never meant to come from what you were holding on to. It was meant to come from how you exist without needing to depend on it. Real stability does not come from external conditions staying the same. It comes from an inner state that remains steady even when things change. And what you are experiencing now is a movement toward that kind of stability. The removal is creating space, not empty space, but clear space. Space where you are no longer shaped by what was temporary. So what you are losing is not leaving you without support. It is freeing you from something that could never fully support you in the first place. And even if it feels uncomfortable now, this shift is guiding you toward a way of holding yourself that does not weaken when circumstances change. Because what is truly meant to hold you cannot be taken away, and this moment is helping you recognize the difference. You are being pulled out of a false version of yourself. What you are experiencing is not only about what is happening around you, it is about what is being changed within you. There is a version of yourself that you have been living as for a long time. It felt normal. It felt familiar. It felt like who you are. But much of it was built around adaptation, how you adjusted to situations, how you responded to expectations, how you shaped yourself to fit what felt safe or acceptable. And now, that version is no longer able to hold itself together in the same way. This is why everything feels unsettled, because when a version of you begins to dissolve, it does not announce itself clearly. It creates confusion, it creates discomfort. It makes you feel like something is off, even if you cannot fully explain it. The things that once felt aligned no longer feel the same. The reactions you used to have no longer come as naturally. The roles you played begin to feel distant, almost like they belong to someone else. You may try to return to that familiar way of being. You may attempt to think the same way, act the same way, respond the same way, but it does not feel right anymore. That is because something deeper in you has already shifted. And once that shift happens, the previous version of you cannot be fully reactivated. It loses its strength, its clarity, its sense of identity. Ibn Arabi would point to this moment as a necessary separation, not from the world, but from an identity that was never fully true to your deeper reality. The false version of yourself is not wrong in a harsh sense. It was a form you took on to navigate life, to protect yourself, to function within certain conditions. But it was never meant to be permanent. It was never meant to define you completely. And now, life is pulling you out of it. Not gently, but clearly, because subtle shifts were not enough to create real change. The deeper the attachment to that version, the stronger the pull needs to be. This is why it feels intense. It is not just change, it is separation from something you once believed was you. This process can feel like losing yourself. You may feel uncertain, like you no longer know how to show up in the same way. You may feel quieter, less reactive, less driven by the same motivations. But this is not emptiness. This is space. Space that is being created so something more real can emerge. The false version of you was built on patterns, seeking approval, avoiding discomfort, holding on to control, shaping your identity around external responses. And as these patterns begin to loosen, you are left without the usual structure you relied on. That can feel uncomfortable. But it is also where clarity begins, because once you are no longer acting from those patterns, you begin to notice something different. A steadiness that is not forced, a presence that is not dependent on how others respond, a way of being that does not require constant adjustment to feel valid. This is the beginning of a more authentic state, one that is not constructed, but revealed. So, what is happening is not a loss of identity, it is a release of what was never fully you. And even though the process feels uncertain, it is guiding you toward a version of yourself that is not shaped by pressure, expectation, or fear. It is guiding you toward a way of existing that is aligned with something deeper, something more stable, something that does not need to change every time life does. And this is why the process feels strong, because you are not being asked to improve the old version of yourself. You are being moved out of it completely. The test is rebuilding how you hold yourself. What you are facing right now is not only about what is happening around you, it is reshaping something deeper, something most people never notice clearly: how you hold yourself internally. Not your posture, not your words, not your outward behavior, but the quiet way you carry your thoughts, your reactions, your expectations, and your sense of stability when life shifts. Before this phase, you may not have paid attention to it. You simply responded the way you always had. When something went wrong, you tightened. When something felt uncertain, you searched for control. When something was at risk, you held on harder. These responses felt natural because they had been repeated for so long. They became your default way of existing. But now, those same responses are no longer working in the same way. They feel heavier. They feel less effective. They feel like they create more tension instead of relief. This is not a coincidence. It is part of the process. Because the way you used to hold yourself was built on subtle forms of strain, trying to manage everything, trying to predict outcomes, trying to secure a sense of safety through effort. And while that may have helped you navigate certain situations, it was never sustainable. It required constant mental pressure. It depended on things staying within your expectations. And the moment those expectations were challenged, your internal state would begin to shake. What this test is doing is breaking that pattern. Not by explaining it to you, but by placing you in situations where the old way of holding yourself cannot function anymore. You try to control, and it does not work the same. You try to fix everything, and it only creates more confusion. You try to hold on tightly, and it increases the pressure you feel. Slowly, you begin to realize that the problem is not just the situation, It is the way you are relating to it. Ibn Arabi would guide you to see that this is where the real transformation begins, not in changing the external conditions, but in changing the inner position from which you meet those conditions. Because how you hold yourself determines how everything feels. The same situation can feel overwhelming or manageable depending on your internal state. And that internal state is now being rebuilt. This rebuilding does not happen through force, it happens through awareness. You begin to notice your reactions instead of immediately acting on them. You begin to feel the tension instead of being controlled by it. You begin to see where you are gripping too tightly, where you are expecting too much, where you are resisting what is already happening. And in that noticing, something starts to loosen. It may feel unfamiliar. You are used to engaging, reacting, trying to solve everything quickly. But now, there is a different approach, forming one that is quieter, steadier, less driven by urgency. Instead of rushing to change the situation, you begin to stabilize yourself within it. You allow space between what happens and how you respond. And in that space, you gain a level of clarity that was not available before. This is where a deeper kind of strength begins to appear. Not the strength of pushing through everything, but the strength of remaining composed when things are uncertain. Not the strength of controlling every outcome, but the strength of not being shaken by outcomes you cannot control. This kind of strength is not loud. It does not seek to prove anything. It is simply present, consistent, and grounded. As this shift continues, you may notice that situations that once triggered strong reactions no longer affect you in the same way. It is not because life has become easier. It is because you are no longer holding yourself in a way that amplifies every challenge. You are no longer tightening against everything that feels uncomfortable. Instead, you are learning how to remain steady even when things are not fully resolved. This is the rebuilding. It is subtle but powerful. It changes the foundation of how you experience everything. You begin to trust your ability to handle what arises without needing everything to be perfect. You begin to rely less on external stability and more on internal balance. And as this happens, the pressure that once felt overwhelming begins to feel different, not because it has disappeared, but because it no longer controls you in the same way. So this test is not here to push you to your limit. It is here to change the way you carry yourself so that your limit is no longer defined by external conditions. It is teaching you how to exist without constant tension, how to respond without losing your center, how to move through uncertainty without collapsing into it. And once this way of holding yourself becomes natural, everything changes, not because the world around you has become easier, but because you are no longer shaped by it in the same way. Real strength is becoming silent and unshaken. What most people call strength is often loud, reactive, and driven by the need to prove something. It shows itself in constant effort, in trying to control outcomes, in defending every position, in responding to everything that feels uncomfortable. It looks active on the outside, but inside it is often restless, dependent on circumstances staying favorable. The moment things shift, that kind of strength begins to struggle because it was built on resistance, not stability. What you are being guided toward now is completely different. It is a form of strength that does not rely on constant reaction. It does not need to be visible. It does not need to announce itself. It is quiet, steady, and deeply rooted. This is why it may feel unfamiliar at first. You are used to engaging with everything, responding quickly, trying to fix or manage what is happening. But now, something in you is beginning to slow down, not out of weakness, but out of clarity. This silence is not emptiness. It is not withdrawal. It is awareness without unnecessary movement. You begin to notice things without immediately reacting to them. You feel emotions without being carried away by them. You observe situations without feeling the need to interfere in every detail. And in that space, something powerful begins to form, a stability that is not shaken by every external change. Ibn Arabi would point to this as a shift in your inner state, where your connection to what is deeper becomes stronger than your attachment to what is happening on the surface. The noise that once controlled your reactions begins to lose its influence. The need to respond to everything begins to fade, not because you do not care, but because you no longer see every situation as something that requires your immediate involvement. You may notice that things that used to disturb you no longer have the same effect. Words that once triggered a strong response now pass through you without creating the same reaction. Situations that once caused anxiety now feel more manageable, even if they are still challenging. This is not because you have become detached in a negative way. It is because you are no longer holding yourself in a way that amplifies every external input. Becoming unshaken does not mean you stop feeling. It means your feelings no longer control your entire state. You can experience discomfort without losing your balance. You can face uncertainty without being overwhelmed by it. You can move through difficulty without it defining your sense of self. This is a different kind of strength, one that is not dependent on everything going your way. This may feel like distance, like you are less connected to things that once felt important. But what is actually happening is a refinement. You are no longer engaging from impulse. You are no longer reacting from habit. You are becoming more intentional, more aware of where your energy goes and why. And as this awareness grows, your presence becomes more stable. This stability changes how others experience you as well. When you are no longer easily shaken, the environment around you responds differently. There is less tension, less unnecessary conflict, less pressure to constantly adjust. Not because the world has changed, but because you are no longer feeding the patterns that created that instability in the first place. Real strength is not about controlling everything around you. It is about not being controlled by it. It is about holding your center even when things are unclear. It is about maintaining clarity even when there is noise. It is about remaining grounded even when there is movement. So this silence that is forming within you is not something to fear. It is not a loss of energy or presence. It is a deeper level of control, not over the world, but over yourself. And once you begin to trust this silence, you realize that strength was never about how much you react. It was always about how steady you remain when you choose not to. What feels like collapse is a release of control. What you are experiencing right now may feel like things are falling apart. Not in a dramatic or obvious way, but in a subtle, unsettling way, where what once felt stable no longer holds the same structure. Plans do not unfold the way you expected. Reactions do not produce the same results. The sense of direction you relied on begins to blur, and in that space, it feels like something is collapsing. But what is actually happening is not destruction. It is the release of a kind of control that was never as solid as it seemed. You were holding more than you realized. Not just responsibilities, but expectations. Ideas of how things should go, how people should respond, how outcomes should align with your effort. This form of control does not always appear as force. It can exist quietly, as a constant need for things to make sense, to stay predictable, to follow a certain path. And when that path begins to shift, it creates discomfort because what you were relying on internally begins to loosen. This is why it feels like collapse, because the structure you built around certainty is no longer supporting you in the same way. You may feel like you are losing your grip, like things are slipping beyond your ability to manage them. But this is not a failure. It is exposure. It is showing you how much of your stability was tied to maintaining control over things that were never fully in your control to begin with. Ibn Arabi would guide you to see that this moment is not about losing your strength. It is about releasing the illusion of control that was limiting your strength. Because as long as you are holding tightly to outcomes, your inner state remains dependent on those outcomes. Your sense of peace rises and falls based on what happens externally, and that creates a constant tension, even if you are not fully aware of it. As this control begins to release, it can feel uncomfortable. You may feel uncertain, like you do not know how to respond anymore. The usual ways of managing situations do not bring the same sense of stability. It may feel like you are being left without direction, but in reality, you are being moved into a different way of existing, one that does not rely on controlling everything to feel steady. This release creates space. Space where you are no longer constantly adjusting yourself to keep everything in place. Space where you can observe without immediately trying to fix. Space where your internal state is not tied to every external shift. And within that space, a different kind of clarity begins to form. You begin to see that not everything requires your control. Not everything needs to be managed, predicted, or held together by your effort. Some things are meant to move on their own. Some outcomes are meant to unfold without your interference. And when you stop trying to control what was never yours to control, your energy begins to return to you. This is where a deeper stability begins to appear. Not the kind that comes from things going your way, but the kind that remains even when things are uncertain. You start to feel less pressure to fix everything. You become less reactive to change. You begin to trust that you can remain steady even without knowing exactly how everything will unfold. What once felt like collapse begins to feel different. It becomes a release, a letting go of what was quietly creating tension within you. And in that release, you are not losing your strength. You are refining it. You are moving from a state of constant effort into a state of grounded presence. So this moment is not taking control away from you. It is freeing you from the need to control everything. It is showing you that your stability does not come from holding everything together. It comes from how you hold yourself when things are no longer held in the same way. And once you begin to understand this, the fear of collapse starts to fade, because you realize that what is falling away was never your foundation, and what remains is something far more stable than control could ever give you. This test is positioning you for a different level of clarity. What you are going through right now is not just a difficult phase, it is a shift in how clearly you are able to see. Not only what is happening around you, but what is happening within you. Before this, many things felt normal simply because they were familiar. You did not question them deeply. You moved through situations based on habits, reactions, and patterns that felt natural. But now, something has changed. The same patterns no longer feel as comfortable. The same situations no longer feel as clear. And that discomfort is not confusion. It is the beginning of clarity. Clarity does not always arrive in a calm and easy way. Sometimes it comes through disruption. When what you relied on begins to shift, it forces you to pay attention. It removes the comfort of automatic responses and places you in a position where you have to see things as they are, not as you assumed them to be. This is why this phase feels intense. It is not just asking you to move forward, it is asking you to understand more deeply. Ibn Arabi would point to this as a refinement of perception. You are being guided to see beyond surface-level understanding, to recognize what is truly stable and what only appears to be, to notice where you were reacting from assumption instead of awareness. And once this level of seeing begins to develop, it changes everything. Because when you see clearly, you are no longer easily pulled into confusion. You may notice that certain things that once made sense now feel incomplete. Certain connections, expectations, or directions may no longer feel aligned. This is not because you are lost, it is because you are no longer seeing from the same level of awareness. The lens has shifted. And when your perspective changes, your relationship with everything around you begins to change as well. This test is removing the layers that were distorting your view. It is showing you where you were holding onto ideas that were not fully accurate, where you were expecting outcomes that were not aligned with reality, where you were interpreting situations based on past patterns instead of present understanding. And as these layers begin to fall away, what remains is something much clearer, much more direct. This can feel uncomfortable because clarity removes illusion. It does not always confirm what you hope to be true. It shows you what it actually is, and that requires adjustment. It requires you to let go of certain assumptions, certain expectations, certain ways of interpreting things. But once you move through that adjustment, something powerful begins to form a way of seeing that is not easily distorted. This new level of clarity changes how you respond to everything. You become less reactive because you understand more. You become less attached to outcomes because you see the bigger structure behind them. You become less influenced by external noise because your internal understanding is stronger. And this does not make you distant, it makes you grounded. You begin to move with intention instead of impulse. You begin to recognize patterns before they fully unfold. You begin to trust your perception because it is no longer clouded by constant reaction. And as this clarity stabilizes, your entire experience of life shifts, not because life has become simpler, but because you are seeing it with greater precision. So this test is not here to confuse you. It is here to refine how you see. It is here to move you out of a state where you rely on assumptions and into a state where you recognize what is actually present. It is positioning you to understand yourself, your environment, and your direction in a way that is deeper than before. And once this level of clarity settles within you, you begin to realize that what once felt overwhelming was actually guiding you toward a way of seeing that cannot be easily shaken. Because when you see clearly, you are no longer lost in what is happening, you are grounded within it. And maybe this moment isn't asking you to fight harder, it's asking you to see deeper. Because what feels like pressure is not here to end you, it's here to shift you into a version of yourself that doesn't break the way you used to. So stay strong, not by forcing control, not by resisting everything, but by remaining steady while everything around you rearranges, because one day you will look back at this exact phase and realize, this wasn't the moment life tested you to see if you would fall. This was the moment it showed you that you no longer do.